Hey everyone, so I've decided to experiment with OBS again, pouring a little 151 here. It's a Saturday night. And don't worry, I plan on trying to keep this one on the short side. So hopefully nothing like my recent response to Salon, which was over an hour and a half long. Also, apologies for all the pops and audio glitches in that one. I think that may have been the result of running the OBS file through iMovie. So I thought a fun idea for a relatively short video would be to take a tour of MorgueOfficial's YouTube channel. I've mentioned Morgue a couple of times on the show recently, but to give you a quick synopsis or recap, he's literally a sideshow performer. He does these kind of extreme human blockhead type stunts. I think his intro video, let's see if I can find it actually before I continue. Yeah, it should show it here.
My name is Morgue,
okay.
and my life is all about pushing the limits of the body and exploring the limitlessness of the mind. The videos...
Yeah, so basically feeding a giant metal hook through his face. But most of his YouTube videos actually feature him kind of waxing philosophical. As I described it before, some of his early content kind of comes across as standard atheist fare, critiques of organized religions, specifically Christianity, etc. Not that I mind, I'm a non believer and I actually found myself enjoying some of his earlier videos. In fairness, I don't know if he himself ever specifically self identified as an atheist. Let's see. And I should also add the disclaimer that I think the Amazing Atheist and Count Jacula, as I've said before, have already done a really good job of debunking some of Morgue's claims. So for me, this is pretty much just about fun and, helping me once again test drive OBS. So a little excuse to tour his channel once again. Okay. Now, once in a while, he'll actually do a video that I dig. Like, he just did one called What is Art? And I disagreed with some of what he had to say, but the basic sentiment about how we should be free to be ourselves, etc., I can really get behind that. So if I go way back into his library, let's see. Well, actually, in fairness to him, here's one that's about 2 years old where he says, Why I Reject Mainstream Religion and Science. So it looks like even a long time ago, he actually kind of had some kind of resentment towards mainstream science, as well as religion. He did this one here, Mainstream Religion is a Big Lie.
If you tell a big enough lie and keep repeating it, the people will eventually come to believe it. Now, this is a quote by the propaganda minister appointed by Adolf Hitler. And it's so important to understand this, because this is how conditioning works. A big lie will be told and then repeated again and again and again until it is so ingrained into the psyche that the mind accepts it as truth. And this is where we have found ourselves today, because we have these evil, disgusting systems like mainstream religion, but it has been associated with positive words and positive imagery and positive symbols. And it has been done so again and again until the mind accepts it as true.
Here's another one I actually listened to a long time ago and I liked. That music's kind of cool. That might be him.
This video is going to be about the dangers of religion. Now, this is much different than why religion is wrong. We're not going to be talking about that. We're not going to be discussing why religion is wrong or is incorrect, because I'm assuming that the majority of my subscribers already realize that the view of reality that religion puts forth is false.
Yep.
We're not discussing why it's wrong. We're discussing why it is dangerous, why it is a bad thing. This needs to be brought up because I'm hearing a lot of comments saying things like, yeah, I don't believe in religion, but it's still a fine thing. You know, if someone wants to believe in religion, it can even be a good thing because it gives their life purpose, or it makes them feel better. It gives them a set of rules to be a better person, etc., etc. It's fine if other people want to believe religion. It's just not for me. I'm talking about this because religion is dangerous. It's not an okay thing whatsoever. And it needs to be brought to the public's attention and awareness that religion is a very dangerous thing and it's not okay. So we're going to be talking about various reasons why religion is harmful. Now, my examples are going to be mostly relegated to Christianity. The general concepts that I'm speaking about are applicable to a wide range of religions. Why is religion dangerous? There's a few different reasons. Well, one, it promotes violence. It's very, very violent. It promotes intolerance. It promotes a master-slave mentality. It makes children feel bad about themselves and terrified of imaginary concepts like hell.
Agree with that, 100%.
To stop looking for answers. It makes people unable to think rationally and logically. Now, these are just a few reasons.
So I find very little I can disagree with so far. I've watched this video before a couple of times, and I actually really enjoyed it. At times, he might be a little bit more militant than I am, a little less forgiving when it comes to religion. But at the end of the day, I basically agree with just about everything he says in this video. In fact, if you watch this video, no one could fault you for assuming that he was an atheist, but he also has issues with mainstream science that go back at least like 2 years. So, yeah, just because someone is strongly opposed to organized religion, that doesn't mean that they don't have any spirituality or that they don't have perhaps some kind of supernatural or fringe beliefs. But he sounds so logical here. It's hard for me to imagine that he would embrace some of the things he'd talk about in his later videos, which he doesn't seem to be able to provide any concrete evidence for. And I want to say this isn't some kind of meant to be a hit piece on this guy. I actually think he's pretty cool in certain ways.
If you tell a big enough lie.
I already watched that. It's just there are some things I strongly disagree with him on. Let's take a look at this video list. Okay, so if we jump forward to some of his more recent videos. Okay, this is the video, Why Science is the New Irrational Religion, that really raised eyebrows. And the amazing atheist, T.J. Kirk, who many of you are probably familiar with, love him or hate him. I actually dig T.J., but I understand why his over-the-top kind of approach can be seen as abrasive or caustic to some or off-putting. But I actually, maybe because I'm such a laid-back guy, I vicariously enjoy his over-the-top attitude. But TJ did a great takedown of Morgue. And I wonder, let me see something. TJ Morgue. Let's see. Yeah, here it is. It's pretty funny.
Before we start with today's video, I know some of you probably remember that a number of months back I promoted a Bernie Sanders action figure. Well, that same company is back with the Elizabeth
Stop
Warren
shilling me shit. Just kidding, TJ. We all got to eat.
For some reason you're
Let's see. Okay, here we go.
Hillary Clinton, I guess you could also do that one. There's another package. So without further ado, let's get started.
People generally think that science is all about truth, but as we'll show in this video, it is nowhere near the truth, and its explanations about your existence and your purpose are just as absurd as mainstream religion.
Oh, are we doing makeup? I didn't know we were doing makeup. No one told me about this. Sorry. I'll be right back. Okay. You were saying?
Looking good, TJ.
Every era thinks that they have it all figured out, and the ideas of the past were crazy. Those born in the early ages of humanity thought that their primitive stories about creation were true.
That's Santa Claus.
And those born in the Christian era thought that their religious ideas were true. And most born today think that scientific materialism is true.
Well, actually, here in America, most people still think religion is true, despite the fact that science, or scientific materialism, as you call it, has done far more to enrich their lives than religion ever did or could. 75.2% of Americans identify as Christians, and about 5.1% are non-Christian religions. 19.6% claim no religious affiliation whatsoever, but a good chunk of those people still hold on to irrational ideas about a higher power or an afterlife. So to say that we live in the age of scientific materialism is a false premise, at least here in the USA.
In actuality, the people of the future will look back on scientific materialism as a primitive and childish view of reality.
Oh my. So, are you claiming that you traveled to the future and you've seen this shit for yourself? Do you have a time machine? Do you? If so, I'm willing to bet it was created by science.
Don't get trapped by the consciousness of the era that you were born into. In 100 years, science will look nothing like it does today.
Yeah, because science is in a constant state of adjustment as new empirical data is uncovered.
So if you are really looking for truth, then have an open mind and weigh everything we are about to say with logic and reason.
Who the hell is we? You seem to be just one person to me.
You see, people assume that scientific materialism is rational. However, that is blatantly incorrect.
Really?
Our system, Hyperianism, is mathematical, rationalist, and
Now, for some reason, that strikes me like a late night infomercial. You know, someone's trying to bullshit you when they say, our system. Okay.
deductive, while science is about sense data, empiricism, and induction. Science is an empirical system, which is opposed to rationalism. This can't be stressed enough. Science is not about reason. Science is about empiricism.
Empiricism and rationalism are not diametrical opposites, though they can come into conflict within the area of epistemology, which is the branch of philosophy devoted to studying the nature of knowledge itself. Empiricists believe that knowledge has to be grounded in observable reality, whereas rationalists believe that knowledge can be gained through sheer deductive reasoning, as opposed to the inductive reasoning of science. So let's explore the difference between deductive reasoning and inductive reasoning in the simplest way possible. Deductive reasoning starts with a theory and attempts to confirm that theory, whereas inductive reasoning starts with observation and then moves on through the stages of hypothesis to theory. So in other words, deductive and inductive reasoning are the inverse of one another. In deduction, you go from theory to hypothesis to observation to confirmation. In induction, you go from observation to pattern to hypothesis to theory. So they're sort of perfect mirror images of one another. And which approach is better? Well, we'll get into that in a bit after John 5 talks about whatever he's going to talk about next.
The definition of empiricism is the doctrine that all knowledge is derived from sense experience, whereas rationalism is the doctrine that all knowledge is based on reason and not on religious faith or sense experience.
Let's see. So Count Jacula, who I kind of disagree with on some things, but I dig his horror reviews and things like that, he actually did a really good takedown of Morgue too. And if you don't, wow, he's done like 3 videos on him. So let's see. Oh, no, he hasn't. One of these is from a different YouTuber. So he critiqued this same video. Science is not, now this is his video, the new irrational religion.
Greetings, fellow heathens. It is I, Count Jacula. So I wasn't planning on doing a video today, but someone sent me this video called Why Science is the New Irrational Religion. And let's just go into this.
People generally think that science is all about truth, but as we'll show in this video, it is nowhere near the truth, and its explanations about your existence and your purpose are just as absurd as mainstream religion.
Dude, look, I know you'd think we'd get along because, like, you wearing makeup, you talk about like heavy metal, satanic music and shit, and on that level, rock on. But I hate to break it to you.
That's one thing I think all of us have in common. TJ, me, Morgue, and Count Jacula. We're all into kind of gothy things, and I think we all like Marilyn Manson.
Science doesn't say anything about your purpose. Like at all. Ever. It doesn't concern itself with that. Ever. Hyperianism. What the fuck? Hang on, kids. I gotta go look this up. Alright. Oh, shit. Urban Dictionary. I thought I was at least gonna get Wikipedia. God damn it! The fucking only entry in here is this guy. Oh, fucking hell. Hyperianism, an individual form of the ancient religion of light, which is based off mathematics, Pythagoras.
Yes, so Morgue did invent Hyperianism, his movement here. And I just wanted to freeze that for a minute. An individual form of the ancient religion, an individual form of the ancient religion of light. Already, what the? Which is based on mathematics, Pythagorean Illuminism or scientific Illuminism. Then says research, in quotes. Who is Mike Hockney? I don't know what's happening here. But an individual form of, I don't even know what the ancient religion of light is. Just off the top of my head here, as someone who's interested in ancient history, mythology, the history of religion and stuff, I know that, say, like the sun, or solar worship was central in many ancient cultures and religions. But I don't know of any broad ancient religion of light. I don't know. It's bizarre. Anyway.
Illuminism. Oh, okay. All right. So Pythagorean Illuminism. All right, let's look that up. I mean, I'm a little bit familiar with Pythagoreanism, but I don't know what the context is here. So let's see. Gnostic Illuminism. Okay, well, I know about that. Gnostic Illuminism is all about the search for gnosis or higher understanding of spiritual matters, essentially.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, all right. I think I see where this guy is coming from. I think calling it Hyperianism is a little douche nozzly, but all right, let's give this guy a chance.
Mm-hmm.
Every era thinks that they have it all figured out, and the ideas of the past were crazy. Those born in the early ages of humanity thought that their primitive stories about creation were true.
Santa Claus.
And those born in the Christian era thought that their religious ideas were true. Mm-hmm. And most born today think that scientific materialism is true.
So I'm sure Jacula will have something to say there, but that's obviously a grotesque logical leap to go from man-made religions that are bogged down with superstition and mythology, etc., to science, trying to make a rational connection between those two, to say because people were factually incorrect with their, will you shut up, with their faith claim, with their ancient faith claims that to us look like superstition and mythology, etc. Well, except for those still extant religions, the Abrahamic faiths, which many people still embrace, but I see as basically being living mythologies or whatever. To go from that to say, since people were wrong about that, since people once believed in these old gods and these old superstitions, that means that people's current belief in science is misplaced. When science, someone's really laying on the horn out there. I'm trying to record a video, douche nozzle. Science is based on observation, on peer review, on repeated testing of a hypothesis, etc. So much different than, believing in spiritual entities or a sky god or whatever, or thinking, when you look at natural phenomena that the gods did it. And science does kind of correct or revise itself over time, but there's still a lot of basic scientific principles or facts that we still utilize that were around in ancient times, mathematics and geometry, etc. So I think there's a world of difference between religion and empirical science. So he's going to argue that his system, Hyperianism, relies on this kind of airtight, super logical reasoning, on deductive reasoning as opposed to inductive reasoning, and mathematics. But already we can see he's making this gross logical leap, trying to draw a comparison between ancient religion and contemporary science.
Have you looked around you? That's really fucking debatable.
But in actuality, the people of the future will look back on scientific materialism as a primitive and childish view of reality.
That is a gigantic assumption. Dude,
Yeah.
I would never fucking make a claim that fucking presumptuous and redonkulous.
Don't get trapped by the consciousness of the era that you were born into.
All right, well, Jung would agree with him there, and yeah, so do I. He's got that one right.
In 100 years, science will look nothing like it does today.
Well, yeah. I mean, science used to basically be alchemy, and we don't call it alchemy anymore. It's now it's science, physics, and engineering. So, yeah.
So if you are really looking for truth, then have an open mind and weigh everything we are about to say with logic and reason.
Wait, we're calling science a religion, now he's calling for logic and reason? Oh, strap in, kids!
You see, people assume that scientific materialism is rational. However, that is blatantly incorrect.
I don't think I'm strapped in hard enough.
Our system, Hyperianism, is mathematical, rationalist, and deductive.
All right, I just want to let you know that this system of Hyperianism is one he made up. All right, there's nobody else. It's just him. All right?
While science is about sense data, empiricism, and induction, science is an empirical system, which is opposed to rationalism.
What?
Yeah.
Oh my God. Okay. Oh, Jesus fucking Christ. All right. So, where to start? Okay, first, let's define induction, and then we will break down all the ways this is wrong. All right. So, inductive reasoning basically takes a premise which you know to be true, and then tries to build an argument using it. For example, all biological life forms that we know of depend on water. Therefore, if we discover a new biological life form, it will probably also depend on water. That's an inductive conclusion. It starts with what you know is true and comes up with a conclusion that is probably true, as opposed to deductive, which starts with a premise that could be false, so that you figure out all the ways in which it might not be true, so that by the end, you have an idea of what is true. That's the idea. Science uses both deduction and induction. All right? You deduce what is true by eliminating everything that is false. And once you have enough of that, you can then try to apply it to things which are like what you have already been studying. For example, ice melts when you heat it. So you then take that observation and apply it to other materials. Does wood melt? No. Does metal melt? Yes. All right, so on some level, at least in this instance, metal and water have a similar property. And from that, we eventually came up with the concept of the melting point. And from that, we also figured out that the reason wood doesn't melt is that a material also has a thing called a kindling point. And if the kindling point is lower than the melting point, it will burn rather than melt. Coming up with that idea, which is a baseline of chemistry, took both deduction and induction. So he's wrong on this level. Science uses both deduction and induction. I'll say it again, both of them. But you want to know the other way in which he...
Strange, I'm tempted to say intellectually dishonest thing that Morgue does, although, I mean, I don't know if it's intentional. This rigid dichotomy he sets up between inductive and deductive reasoning, when I think both are tools in the scientific toolbox, and they don't need to be pitted against one another. Let's see. Here's another one that kind of made my jaw drop. How we know the soul exists using mathematics.
We're going to show you how it's possible for the soul to exist, and without any appeal to faith or miracles, but by utilizing nothing but logic, reason, and mathematics. Hyperianism absolutely rejects faith, miracles, and an external God. We are concerned with purely rational and mathematical truth. We don't pick and choose what we want to be true. We understand reality as it is in itself, objectively as it truly is. Remember to always keep an open mind and examine everything with reason, regardless of your personal beliefs, opinions, or biases. We will now show how the existence of the mind, the soul, is possible. An in-depth explanation would take an immense amount of time, and it would include philosophy and mathematics that is well beyond the average viewer. For this reason, keep in mind that what follows...
Wait. So you're going to claim you can prove something as big as the soul exists, but the explanation would take too long, or at least an in-depth explanation. So just accept my my vague synopsis here as evidence.
Is an extremely shortened and simplified version of the explanation, and it's restricted to the two-dimensional plane. Its purpose is to give you an understanding of how it's possible for the soul to exist and why it necessarily exists in the specific way that it does. Remember that we use the word mind and soul interchangeably. They're the same concept. And as we've shown in other videos, the mind, the soul, is a completely mathematical entity defined by Euler's formula.
Oh, look at that screenshot. So in a way, I don't have any problem with using mind and soul interchangeably or synonymously in a way. Even though I'm an agnostic atheist, I lean towards the materialist scientific point of view, worldview. And I also tend to believe that consciousness is most likely an emergent property of the brain, meaning when the brain dies, it's lights out, basically. But I think poetically, you can refer to consciousness, to the psyche, to the mind, as the quote-unquote soul. The big question is, not does the soul exist? In that poetic sense, it does exist. We know we are self-aware beings. We possess minds, individual personalities, thoughts, and feelings. But does that individual self survive death? I can't claim to know with 100% certainty, but sadly, it's not something I want to believe is true. But what we know about neuroscience, biology, the lack of evidence for things like spirits and ghosts and afterlife, I tend to think that most likely consciousness is an emergent property of the brain, and that when we die, there's a good chance, show's over, folks. And so he's going to talk about something he calls Euler's formula. And according to Count Jacula, I don't know if he's correct or not. I think it's supposed to be pronounced Euler's formula. And I think Morgue really uses it out of context, or, you know, he invents his own context for the word. Let me do a search for it. Apple trying to sell me stuff. Why is my internet connection so slow? Okay, here we go. Euler's formula named after, or that's how Jacula said it. I don't know what the proper pronunciation is. Named after Leonard Euler. Euler is not the type of name you want to be trying to pronounce after drinking 151 for the past half hour. Named after Leonard Euler, is a mathematical formula in complex analysis that establishes the fundamental relationship between the trigonometric functions and the complex exponent. So let me try that again. Euler's formula, named after Leonard Euler. What the hell? So let me try that again. Euler's formula, named after Leonard Euler. Let me try that again. Euler's formula, named after Leonard Euler, is a mathematical formula in complex analysis or analyses that establishes the fundamental relationship between the trigonometric functions and the complex exponential function. When Euler's formula evaluates to which is known as Euler's identity. That's completely over my head, but I notice it doesn't mention anything about the soul. Euler's formula is ubiquitous in mathematics, physics, and engineering. The physicist Richard Feynman called the equation, quote-unquote, our Joule, and also in quotes, the most remarkable formula in mathematics. Let's see. Yeah, So, scrolling through this whole article, and I don't notice anything about a mention of the soul. What if I type in Euler's formula soul? And once again, Morgue pronounces it Euler's formula. Here's a Live Science article. Euler's identity is an equality found in mathematics that has been compared to Shakespearean sonnet and described as the most beautiful equation. It is a special case of a foundational equation in complex arithmetic called Euler's formula, which the late great physicist Richard Feynman called, and once again, our Joule. Not seeing anything about souls. I don't see anyone else other than Morgue calling it the soul equation. Well, maybe I'll have to eat my words. Here's, I thought maybe it would be someone else. I saw Euler's formula referred to as the soul equation, and look who pops up, John 5. In case you don't know, in case you're not a Manson fan, John 5 was Marilyn Manson's guitarist. I think he plays with Rob Zombie now. And so here's, it looks like a back and forth maybe between Morgue and I don't know who this other person is. In your video, you state that everything is logic and mathematics. That does not jive. Speaking in terms of, is it Gödel's? I don't know. Incompleteness theorems, in particular, the fact that contradictions are inherent to all systems. By that very notion, it is impossible for everything to be logical. Moreover, you make a huge leap by trying to define something that has not ever been proved to exist in the first place. And I don't know if she's talking about the soul there or what. Another thing, look at the meaning you ascribe to Euler's formula under the lens of, is it Tartsky's? A lot of these names are, you know, I'm drinking 151, people. Undefinability theorem. And then he replies, let us clear up some confusion. In Hyperianism, everything is mathematical. Mathematics is both ontological. Well, I understand that word, ontology. I think ontology has to do with the nature of being or existence. Well, and I look it up just to be safe. Ontology, the branch of metaphysics dealing with the nature of being. Ontology is the philosophical study of the nature of being, becoming, existence, and or reality. So, okay, I'll give myself a gold star there. Let's see. Mathematics is both ontological and is proposed by the philosopher Wittgenstein, or is it Wittgenstein, tautological. To talk about logic and reason is to refer to the consequence of living mathematics. And I think a tautology is a kind of circular claim in a way. Let me look that up too. Tautology, the saying of the same thing twice in different words, generally considered to be a fault of style. They arrived one after the other in succession. Okay, so I guess I was basically right. To talk about logic and reason is to refer to the consequences of living mathematics. By, I don't know if it's Gödel or what, in completeness theorems, mathematics cannot be based on an axiomatic system as it results in incompleteness or inconsistency. This shows that mathematics is not based on what humans have defined as abstract axiomatic logic, but instead is ontologically real, flowing from the sole equation, Euler's formula, or Euler's formula, according to him. Since it is a non-axiomatic ontological tautology, it is necessarily 100% consistent and complete. Mathematics is not some unreal symbolic manipulation game that humans came up with, but instead is a living, ontologically real feature of our world and all possible worlds. So, in a way, that seems like kind of a tautology to me. It's kind of like saying the sole equation, which he equates with Euler's formula, is real because it ontologically flows from the sole equation, and he still hasn't. I mean, he seems to be the only one referring to Euler's formula as the sole equation. And he does this kind of call to authority where, he says, in Hyperianism, everything is mathematical. Well, he invented Hyperianism. And then my understanding is that Euler's formula is an axiom. That is incorrect. It is the mathematical expression of Leibniz's PSR, which is ontological and tautological because its negation is self-refuting. Euler's formula is a tautology and hence always true. It's always true because it's a tautology. It is not an axiom. I still don't understand this part. So he's definitely not a dumb guy. He seems fairly intelligent, and he seems to have a decent understanding of these terms he's throwing around, these philosophical and mathematical terms. But he seems to be kind of trying to manipulate or shoehorn or change the definition of these things to fit his personal agenda regarding this philosophy he invented.
We will now show why this is true. We first begin with the principle of sufficient reason, which states, for everything that exists, there exists a sufficient reason why it is thus and not otherwise. In other words, for everything that exists, there is a reason why it exists that way. You can't have anything that happens for no reason at all. Ultimately, everything must have a reason, even if that reason is immensely complicated. For example, if you found a ball on the floor, there exists a reason why there is a ball in that particular place. Maybe a kid put it there, or a dog dropped it. Whatever the case may be, there's some reason why it's there and not somewhere else. It didn't just miraculously appear there without any reason at all. Everything in reality has a reason for why it is the way it is. We're going to refer to the principle of sufficient reason as the PSR for short. Now, you use the PSR constantly without realizing it. Anytime you try to think of a reason for something, you're using the PSR, which states that everything has a reason. If you try to think of a reason that the PSR is wrong, you're trying to find a reason why the PSR is wrong, which is to use the PSR, which states that everything has a reason. So you can't try to think of a reason why the PSR is wrong without using the PSR in the process and thereby affirming its validity. Anyone who tries to give reasons why the PSR is wrong is absurd as this is a self-defeating act. This shows that they have absolutely no understanding of what the PSR is, because as soon as someone tries to give a reason that it's wrong, they're actually using it. Furthermore, if the PSR were false, any reasons used to show that it was false would automatically be false themselves, since their coherency and their truth value depends on the PSR being true. And if you simply state that the PSR is wrong, you're saying that things can have no reason whatsoever. And if that's your position, you're literally insane, and there's no point in having a conversation with you because you've literally rejected reason. We all have to agree that things have a reason for their existence in order to be able to have a rational discussion. If we don't start there, it's no longer a rational discussion, and it's just insane nonsense. We begin with the principle of sufficient reason. It's really simple. It's reason itself. Everything that exists must have a reason why it is the way it is, instead of it being a different way. Now keep this in mind, as we'll show that the soul exists necessarily by the PSR. Euler's formula is the governing equation for the soul. Now take a look at its graph.
So I'm going to read some tweets. Woo. I don't know if you can see that I received from the Justicar. And I actually love the Justicar. He's a YouTuber. I think he's an ex-cop, ex-military, kind of a logician, actually teaches mathematics, and he does excellent logical breakdowns on his YouTube channel. And here's what I asked him to take a look at this, and here's one tweet. I couldn't get past the patently illogical logical introduction. Children should be required to take an introductory class in logic. But he apparently did keep watching. See, the entire argument begs the question. The PSR, principle of sufficient reason, is used to explain why some extant thing exists as it does, the very question at issue. Okay, then he continues. The question at issue is whether or not the thing under consideration exists at all. The existence of the thing in question must be shown otherwise. So it seems like he likes to kind of latch on to these buzzwords or catchphrases and tries to repeatedly use those to shore up his arguments. But if you look beyond them, I mean, there isn't much there. So Euler's formula, this mathematical equation which he seems to hijack for his own purposes and rebrands the soul formula, uses that again and again like some kind of appeal to authority. And then he's repeating the PSR, the principle of sufficient reason, and peppering that throughout his speech. Okay, so I think I'll take a look at one last one. A video called, and I feel like to some degree this kind of falls in my wheelhouse. I'm a little, out of my element when it comes to advanced mathematics, etc., to say the least. But I do know something, I like to think. At least I have a layman's knowledge regarding things like ancient history, religion, spirituality, etc. And he has a video that caught my attention called What Are Higher Entities?
What's up, guys? I'm Carly Kloss.
What's up?
And today I'm going to show you how you can build your very own website.
Later, Carly.
Do higher entities exist? Do they have an interest in you, in humanity, and the future of the planet? Are they angels? Are they demons? Are they extraterrestrials? Or are they something else entirely? This is a topic that we are intimately familiar with, and a deep secret that has been hidden from this world. Ancient holy texts are filled with stories about angels and demons and creatures that fell from heaven to earth. The Book of Enoch describes beings that are called the Watchers, those that would watch over humanity. These fallen angels taught the people of this world technology, the movements of the moon, science, and even art, makeup, and writing. They embraced sexuality, love, and lust. In almost every ancient culture, there are stories of visitors from the sky or from heaven. And today, your people discuss aliens and visitors from another
Your
planet.
people.
Of course, you can't trust ancient texts and the babblings of insane conspiracy theorists. They have all gotten the details quite wrong. Let us illuminate the subject. Now, this isn't to say that there isn't life on other planets. Of course there are. But we are
Most likely,
speaking of something much different.
How
In
much of it
every
is-
age, the people of the
I think that's kind of the scientific consensus now, that most likely, chances are there's life elsewhere in the universe. The universe is so vast, and the basic ingredients for life, or the necessary circumstances, most likely there's life elsewhere. How much of it is primitive or rudimentary, say bacteria, single-celled organisms, that type of thing, and how much is advanced, self-aware life with established civilizations and technology, I don't know. I think was it the Drake equation that tries to suss that out, how much advanced life is probably out there in the universe. I don't know how accurate the Drake equation is, but I'll actually agree. It's funny because he says so much far out stuff. Then he starts talking about little green men or life in outer space. And the first impulse might be to kind of roll your eyes at that too. But I kind of agree with him when it comes to the possibility of life elsewhere in the universe. Let's go on.
world tried to describe these higher entities in the context of the time that they exist in. In ancient times, when consciousness was young and the world was ruled by religious fanatics and holy men, people imagined these beings to be extremely spiritually advanced, angels, demons, visitors from heaven. They had no understanding of science and technology. They could only describe these entities through the lens of their primitive consciousness and limited understanding. So they did so in terms of visitors from heaven. Today, in the scientific age, in the era of technology, people no longer imagine them as angels and demons. Instead, they imagine them through the lens of the consciousness of today, and they imagine them as little green men in flying saucers. When the world was ruled by prophets, they imagined...
He's not the first one to say that. Other people have posited or theorized that as we become more technologically advanced, and as people's literal belief in religion has kind of slipped away, that stories of alien visitations, beliefs in UFOs or whatever, have kind of taken the place of stories about fairy folk or angels, etc., etc.
Angels. Today, while the world is ruled by technology, they imagine aliens. You see, human beings always imagine higher entities as being advanced versions of the current time they live in. In a very spiritual age, they imagined highly spiritual beings. Now, in a very technological age, they imagine them as highly technologically advanced beings. The truth is that both of these conceptions of higher entities are incorrect. These entities are timeless, and they exist as they do, regardless of how they are understood.
Okay, so he's making a couple of flawed assumptions here. First, at the very beginning, he's claiming that these entities, which he believes exist, and that's a flawed assumption right there. How does he know these spiritual or metaphysical beings exist in the first place? Is he going to say Euler's formula or mathematics proves their existence? Probably. How does he know these beings exist in the first place? And then, for someone who we watched one of his earlier videos, and even says in his later ones that you shouldn't trust ancient man-made religious texts and whatnot. Yet he's willing to say that these entities, which he believes exist, are the same as certain entities referred to in certain ancient texts, such as the so-called Watchers in the apocryphal Book of Enoch. How the hell does he know that?
Through the lens of a primitive human consciousness. The definition of angel, demon, and alien is laughable when applied to these entities. But indeed, higher entities do exist. It is absurd to think that a human is the current peak of evolution, and there are, of course, more highly evolved beings. Reality is mathematical. And
here we go. So he's not necessarily saying they're spiritual beings in the conventional sense. He's saying they're highly evolved beings that are apparently so evolved, perhaps they no longer need corporeal bodies or whatever. And now he's going to try to explain their existence using mathematics, but he probably won't give us the specific math and show exactly how it proves these beings' existence. But he's just going to tell you that, or tell us that they exist because math.
Higher entities are mathematical beings. They exist outside of space-time, within the frequency singularity. That is, in the domain of pure mind. Those that have indulged in the psychedelic experience will have seen hints of what we are talking about.
No.
They exist in the world of thought, shaping intricate patterns within the collective consciousness.
Hopefully none of my family watched this, but I've done mushrooms, LSD, what else? Distilled morning glory seed juice, other hallucinogens. And I've seen, like the trails, and I've seen things kind of double. I've had the, as a kind of artistic person, I've always been pretty good at seeing faces and wood grain and things like that. I noticed that type of thing seems to be heightened in me under the influence of certain hallucinogenics or hallucinogens. But I've never really seen like interdimensional beings or anything like that. I hear the closest you can probably get to that is through DMT visions. I've never tried DMT. It's on my bucket list. As someone with a history of wrestling with things like depression and anxiety, I don't know how smart it would be to get on board the hallucinogen train again, especially something as potent as DMT. But supposedly it only lasts for like 10 or 15 minutes. So maybe someday. Was that too much information?
Of the universe. Pay close attention to what we are saying, as we are pushing past the limits of the ordinary human's capacity to understand. You are not a body. You are a mind, a construct of infinite mathematical energy. These higher entities are the same as you. They are also minds, just at an extremely high level of evolution.
Okay, so philosophically, that's interesting. He says, we're not bodies, we're minds. And in some philosophical sense, that's kind of true, because all of reality gets filtered through our senses and our brains. We feel so steeped in the real world that it seems like we're just experiencing it, and it's easy to forget that everything we perceive and experience is filtered through our senses. In that sense, we're kind of experiencing it secondhand. But we need our bodies in order to filter that information, that sense data, that sensory data. So it's kind of fun and romantic to say that we're just minds. And once again, in a sense, kind of we are. All we really have, each one of us is kind of like an island universe, in my opinion. We all experience our individual consciousness. Everything we experience is filtered through the senses in our brains. But, if you were to jump off a building right now and your body went splat and you attained brain death, I don't think, that individual self would go floating off the top of your body and, up into another reality or something. I think it would be pretty much lights out. That would be the end of the soft machine that is your brain. So I think we're both minds and bodies, where bodies that experience consciousness and who experience reality via the senses in our brains. But once again, like I said earlier, I tend to believe in consciousness as an emergent property of the brain. And now, why do I think that? And that's just kind of a fancy way of saying that I think consciousness is the product of the meat brain. And I think as the nervous system became more and more complex throughout evolution, and eventually, we came to the mammalian brain, and that became more and more complex to the point where eventually you had human beings and maybe a couple of other species who are real highly sentient and self-aware. So, you start out with really rudimentary life, well, even before flatworms and things like that, but eventually you get really rudimentary life that maybe has like eye spots and a very, very basic nervous system. Eventually you have reptiles and amphibians that have little more than what would be the equivalent of our brain stem, probably aren't terribly that self-aware. Then eventually you have mammals, primates, hominids, and you have us who are capable of deep self-reflection and awareness. And I think there is undeniably a link between chemical brain states and consciousness, or between brain health and consciousness. So let's say someone wants to escape their troubles, or it's the weekend and they want to let loose a little, relax. Maybe they have some of this, or if they're smart, something not quite as potent, 151. And we know everything from caffeine to chocolate to alcohol can vastly alter, well, not vastly in the case of things like caffeine and chocolate, but even mild things like that, which you technically could consider drugs, can alter consciousness and perception. Then things like alcohol and heavy stimulants, and then hallucinogens. And we know how vastly hallucinogens can alter perception. And then say something like antidepressants. Like I've talked about before, I take fluoxetine, which is basically generic Prozac. And different antidepressants work in different ways, but it's thought that many of them work on the neurotransmitter, the brain chemical known as serotonin, kind of the happy molecule. And the more serotonin, the higher levels of serotonin in the brain, or the more serotonin is potentiated, pretty much the happier you feel and the greater sense of well-being you feel. And serotonin is the same drug that's potentiated by MDMA or Molly. So in a way, an antidepressant that works on serotonin is kind of like a milder version of MDMA, much milder. It's thought that MDMA is so potent that it can actually cause a serious depletion of serotonin. So we know that certain chemicals can directly affect consciousness and perception. And we know that, say, certain degenerative brain illnesses like Alzheimer's, dementia, etc., that these illnesses that affect the integrity of the meat brain have a direct result on the sense of self, on impulse control behavior, and impulse control behavior that can go to like frontal lobe damage, etc. There's the famous case of Phineas Gage, I think it is. Was he some kind of railroad worker or something who got like a pipe through his head, and supposedly his personality vastly changed in the wake of that accident? Some of that story might be exaggerated, I think I read. But we know they used to give people lobotomies, which could essentially zombify, take a vibrant, fully aware person and basically turn them into a walking zombie, depending on what type and how extensive the lobotomy was. So it seems that there's a direct correlation between brain chemistry, structural integrity of the brain, and consciousness and the self. And given the lack of evidence for things like spirits, an immortal soul, and afterlife, it seems logical to conclude to me that when the brain goes, we probably go. The only workaround I can think of, and I'm a big fan of Aldous Huxley, his book, The Doors of Perception, which I probably have around somewhere, but I'm not going to get up to get it right now, had a huge impact on me. And he talks about some kind of consciousness reducer valve where, and I'm not saying I believe this, but it's a fascinating idea, where in order to keep us functional in a practical utilitarian sense, we can't walk around mind blown like someone on hallucinogens all the time. We need to be able to focus on mundane tasks and be able to get things done and be able to do what we have to do to survive. But he posited or theorized that hallucinogens kind of cranked open that valve and let outside consciousness in, and you'd enter that kind of mind-blown state where you became one with what he would call the mind at large, or the kind of universal mind or something like that. Fascinating stuff, and I used to kind of buy into stuff like that. I used to be heavily into Eastern religion and spirituality when I first closed the door on literal belief in Christianity. But I'm even skeptical about all that now. I don't think there's really any solid proof for a collective. Well, you could have like a collective consciousness, speaking kind of sociologically or something like that, but a literal kind of collective unconscious or collective universal mind, some kind of vast ocean of consciousness that permeates everything. I mean, I could be wrong, but I don't see any strong evidence for something like that. It does seem to me that consciousness is an emergent property. So the only workaround to me is the possibility that the brain is a receiver rather than a generator of consciousness, which is what some types out there actually propose. I can't claim to know that that's not the case with 100% certainty, but given what we know about neurology, biology, science, the lack of evidence for the existence of, like I said, spirits, or the lack of evidence for psychic phenomena or the ability of consciousness to exist outside the brain, I'd say most likely, it seems like consciousness as an emergent property is kind of the model to go with at this point. I'd be very happy to be proven wrong. But holy crap, I said this was supposed to be a short video, and it's already been well over an hour. So I'm going to call it quits, and I'll probably try to edit this down to a manageable size. So, all right, thanks, everyone. You guys know the drill. Facebook, Twitter. You can subscribe to the podcast via iTunes, Podbean, Stitcher. If you want to help the show out monetarily, you can go to patreon.com/theweekindoubt and support what I do here for as little as 99 cents a month. All right, later.